I would like to introduce our fourth speaker from Akamai Technologies, Principal Architect Mr. Barry Green. He is coming to us live from the West Coast of US. The topic he is sharing is securing your networking using Shadowservers. He will share with us how to make use of Shadowserver's daily network report to effectively secure your network. This tool is a public benefit service funded by the community for the community. Let's welcome Barry.
Okay, well, thank you, everyone. Let me go ahead and present the screen here so everybody can see it. Move this over here so that way it doesn't block people. So thank you, everyone. Can you hear me okay?
Yes, all good.
Okay, all good. All right. So I don't know how many people here have heard of Shadowserver. The goal after this is everybody should be doing their part to actually subscribe to the Shadowserver daily reports. Because if you run a network inside any organization and you're not subscribing to the Shadowserver daily reports, you are missing something that is going to help you protect your network in these troubling times. So here I work for Akamai Technologies right now. I've worked for many different networks. You can go back to my LinkedIn history. You can see got a long history in Singapore in a networking community. I'm also a volunteer working with Shadowserver in building out a whole bunch of different capacity and capabilities. And a quick briefing on what Shadowserver is. Shadowserver is kind of started at the same time Team Cymru started. So it's irony to have back-to-back talks of Team Cymru and Shadowserver, but doing different functions within the public benefit capabilities of the internet. Most of the time when you see like a big takedown, a law enforcement takedown, you're going to find that Shadowserver was quietly behind the scenes working with the law enforcement agencies and taking it down. So that's the nature of the organization. So you're invited to kind of look through the website and see what's there. What we're going to focus on are these daily reports. Because what you want to find out about your network, you get all these different vendors and everybody coming to you saying you need to protect your network. But what do the bad guys see? And what Shadowserver offers you is a way where every day you can get a whole series of over 100 reports of what's going on your network, of what the bad guys are seeing and what they can be breaking into that you don't even know that they're breaking into, right? So, what would really be cool is if you say, what is the bad guy scanning on my network? What are they poking at? What are they seeing that I'm not seeing, right? Now you can go out there and subscribe to different commercial tools. And I look at that and I go like, why are you doing the commercial tools when you got a public benefit tool you can work on first? And a lot of times the public benefit tool is actually superior to the commercial tools. And you'll see why it's superior to the commercial tool. So here's the key thing. You're an organization and you got people, now home workers, cloud services, public internet, and you got to have a good visibility of what's going on with your risk with network visibility around it. Now, it would be nice if you had one source that give you, here's what different honeypots are seeing. Here's what takedowns are seeing. Here's what daily scans are seeing. Here's what this phishing and spam exercises are doing. Here's where you do malware analysis and you pop command and control and you have this command and control actually hosted inside your network. Are booters and stressors doing DOS attacks? Are they in your network, right? So these are the sort of things when you collect it all together, that is part of the Shadowserver report, right? So the way this works, the network reporting is it's sent out to all the different organizations out there. So if you can validate that I am somebody responsible for a particular autonomous system, then you can set up and get these daily reports for free. It doesn't cost you anything. You can get it via email. You can get it via API access, right? So Shadowserver does a validation process to make sure you are who you say you are, because this is valuable sort of data sets that's out there. Now, it also has a program with national CSIRTs. So for instance, the Singapore Cybersecurity Agency, they get a daily report on all your networks. So if you want to know one of the sources where the Singapore Cybersecurity Agency is getting data on all your networks, they are a subscriber. They get the daily reports for Singapore, right? And they kind of understand, here's all the open DNS resolvers because Shadowserver tracks that. Here's a bunch of command and control for active botnets. They track that. So they actually have that data set, right? Because they're authorized to do it, and they'll protect it. They'll do what they're supposed to in taking care of Singapore's instance. But that data for your network is also available to you. So the way this kind of works with the daily reports is it's sent to carriers, cloud organizations, law enforcement also gets access to it, right? So it's legitimate resources out there. Right now, this data is a little bit, 4,600. It's now close over to 5,000 different network organizations who get the reports daily. Now, how does this work with all these different data sets? Well, if you've been doing this for over 15 years, a lot of the organizations who do security work and security takedowns kind of trust Shadowserver. So it gets access to information that you don't find anywhere else. Like if you had a bunch of white hat people go out there and they take down a piece of malware, you want to park the command and control infrastructure somewhere so you don't have to maintain it, somebody else does. It gets passed over the Shadowserver. And then Shadowserver takes the data from there. And this is one of the reasons why people pass it over there to Shadowserver's management. And Shadowserver then takes the relevant information of, like, say, I just took head away from this botnet, but I got all these infected bots. Okay, now I need to notify all the different organizations that this is infected. Well, the daily reports is one of the most effective way of reaching out to different autonomous systems all over the world to let them know that that you got infected bots and here's what you need to do to clean it up. The reports now are they're constantly being added. They're being added because of different intervention activities against miscreant activities out there on the net, whether it's DOS or phishing or things like that. They're also being added by request. In other words, investigative teams will ask, can you get this report ready to go, because we're getting ready to do a takedown, and once we do the takedown, a new report will pop up. So over the past year, it went from 70 different reports now to 111 reports. It's been a very busy year, as many people know, because of the different security actions with it. Now, all the reports are there. They're accessible. You get the email, but you also get the APIs. A lot of people are using the API access, and the reports are broken down to, like, for instance, in this one here, it's a brute force attack report. Like somebody from your network, because this is what this taught about. Somebody from your network is attacking somebody else with a brute force attack. So what you're getting a report on is, here is one of the devices, or an infected device, or one of your customers who's actually configured and attacking somebody else, right? And you'll get the timestamp, because the timestamps are important, because a lot of times you're going through firewalls, network address translation, you got to go through and translate it. So you get the IP, the ports, and a bunch of any other information they can provide through that reporting, right? So that's the context with it. Now, over the years, this keeps on adding. I just pinged the team earlier today and said, hey, we need to update this slide, because in 2020, there's about like 14 different takedown operations that happen that you add into these major activities where data sets are then added to the reports. That's why over the past year, it went from 70 to 100, 111, and because of these different takedown actions. When you sign up for it, because you just go to the Shadowserver website, we'll have the link over there, show you guys how to do it. You can actually put details about your organization by autonomous system, by your CIDR blocks, by your delegated IP blocks, like if it's in the cloud, or with your domains. So I'll give an example, because I'm going to mention this later, Akamai's example, because we're a consumer. We use this report as one of our tools of a multitude of different tools to actually protect our network. And we put in our ASNs that we have. We put all the CIDR blocks of the IP addresses we have. And since we're an edge network, that's a lot of different CIDR blocks. Then we put our domains in there, and we got a lot of different domains. All right. And we're not so much of a delegated IP address block, since we're not an ISP, we're an edge. And we put all those in there. And then we get the reports every day. And we also have the API access. We use tools where we consume both formats with it. All right. So how do you get started? You sign up to this site here, right? You go to shadowserver.org, and you look right at the top right, you'll say sign up, right? And then you can start filling in. And they're going to ask you things, what your name, who you are, what your organization is, a role in the organization, email, phone number, if you have a PGP key, details about your network. If you're a national cert, you let them know. but most of the national certs that are part of the first.org are already getting the Shadowserver reports. So that's, but you never know the new ones that come up, right? And then what happens is you get added into once it's all approved and is validated, where Shadowserver knows you are who you say you are, then they add a whole bunch of list of emails with it. Now, how do you grant trust, right? So the key thing is you don't want this information going out. You don't want people who are somewhere else to find out how your network is vulnerable. That will be a bad thing. So you only get your data, right? So that's the Shadowserver principle. So you can be, competitor A, competitor C, competitor D. They don't get access to this data. Now, people will come knocking on the door and say, "Hey, Shadowserver, I'll give you a lot of money. Can you give me all the data?" Nope. Over the years, it's a nonprofit public company. There's a nonprofit in the United States and a nonprofit in Europe, in the Netherlands, and it's very, very, very protective to make sure that this sort of principle of making sure that only the appropriate people who need access to the data gets access to the data, right? So you're not going to see Shadowserver turn into a commercial arm. And this is all listed down in the privacy in terms with how it works out. And the exception to that is with the national certs. So the national certs, there's an agreement that gets signed with the national certs under the privacy terms. And they comply and agree to protect the information for their constituents and use that data for protecting their constituents with the national C-certs. So now leveraging, let's give you a couple of examples. So one example that was me, I was at this is a past network that was on, the charge of security on that network. It was a vendor. And I get in the morning, I have my cup of coffee, and I get a Shadowserver report that I have 19 computers on my network that are infected with medbroot. And we're like, okay, crap. I look at my other tools, there's no errors anywhere. Immediately tell the team, go pull those 19 computers off the network, all right? These computers were up-to-date patched. They were up to date with, whatever browser. Many of them were using extra tools they plug into the browser. This is inside of a major security organization as a vendor, and it was all protected. But yet Shadowserver told me those things were infected, and we pulled them out, and we found out, yes, they were done with medbroot. Medbroot's nasty. And the interesting thing when we did the post-mortem analysis with that is we found that all 19 people, and several of them were security people, were looking at news off of a Microsoft site, and a malvertisement flipped, and a 0-day came in and got the medbroot into the organization. So that cost money because we had to, medbroot, we had to trash the disk and rebuild the systems. But it would have cost even more money if we left it there and the infection started laterally spreading across the organization. That would have been bad. That was all triggered because it happened really quick. It happened at night, and then next morning we caught it, stopped it, right? So this is an example, right? And that's a typical example that over and over in other organizations I've used the Shadowserver report, network report. Another time, this is also an example of me. I go into a mobile network and they have no budget or staffing for security, but I got to do security. How am I going to do security? I got no budget and staffing. I couldn't do it because we're rebuilding the mobile operation. So I got 2 people on my team and basically said, here's your job. Every day you're going to go through the Shadowserver report. You're going to start hunting down problems on the network. And the priority is our network infrastructure first, then our customers' infrastructure, right? So make sure we're taking care of all our infrastructure, all our different servers and capacities, then go over to the customer infrastructure. That was the kind of triage priority. And it said, every time you go around and do this, you add to our knowledge base of how do we fix it? How do we track it? How do we fix it? And that was for over a year and a half, our only security kind of engine. And it cleaned up so many problems. We were driving our vendors who were supposed to be doing all this. We were driving them nuts because my 2 engineers were just whacking and say, fix this, let's get this fixed, let's patch this. Why is this out of date? Why is this vulnerable? You're running code that's 2 years old. Let's get this patched, right? All this was driven from the Shadowserver reports, right? Didn't cost me. I didn't have to buy any new reports, any new special feeds, any new services. They just used the Shadowserver reports, and it really prevented a lot of different issues with it. So give you another example. This is a major carrier in the United States. This is where they combine tools together. I mean, we just had to talk about Netflow, right? So what we are doing is we're tracking what is the spoof traffic coming into your network. So what they do is they take Shadowserver gives a list inside of their autonomous system of all the known reflectors. Here's all the DNS reflectors. Here's all the MTP reflectors. Here's all the charging reflectors, right? Here's all the LDAP reflectors. Shadowserver gives you all those. You will know exactly, here's all the potential reflection resource that can be used for a DOS attack to attack somebody else in your network. So they have that. So then what they do is they combine it with Netflow data on the egress with the API. So they have this little tool. And if anybody's interested in this tool, just ping me, because it's an open source tool they called Tattletale. And I'll point you guys to the GitHub and things like that. And so they take these two sources, the Netflow tool and the Shadowserver tool, and they put it together, and they're able to see the spoof flow coming in. And then they'll be able to say, okay, this spoof flow is coming from this operator. Right. And so now you can start doing backtrace operations. You can start going back to the stressor who's actually using these resources. Right. Now, some people would say, well, wait a minute, in a big carrier, if I know all the reflectors, why don't I go clean them up? Well, anybody here ever call up a dental office and say you need to fix your DNS server? And the dental office goes, huh? What? What's DNS? Right. Remediating some of these problems when you get over to operator networks get to be very tedious, right? So that's one of the challenges we have. Shadowserver has a bunch of unique the network scanning, it scans the network every day, entire internet gets scanned for a whole bunch of different vulnerability types, right? So it's got that's one of the sources of data. It's got this huge honeypot system that's set up for and HoneyNet clients. And if anybody's interested in that, go to Shadowserver, ask them about the honeypot as a service capability to expand honeypots, right? So that's this data is old. It's now probably 115 countries now that is expanded into with different honeypot systems deployed out. It's got a huge sandbox infrastructure. Take virus totals times 2. As a matter of fact, virus totals gets a lot of the sandbox infrastructure from Shadowserver. A lot of the people who do malware analysis, what is not known is that it's actually Shadowserver is one of the engines behind the scenes feeding the entire antivirus, anti-malware, endpoint security community with their sandbox infrastructure. So it's all automated. It pops up malware and puts it into. There's like 4 new endpoint security companies we have to recruit into it. But basically, if you see all the top 30 malware, antivirus, it's all being analyzed, and then that data goes back to them. That's a different service that Shadowserver provides to the community. They got all the different blacklists out there. They got the sinkhole systems, that I mentioned with botnets and malware, and we got a whole bunch of data sharing resources. So as a reminder, who is Shadowserver? Shadowserver is a public benefit company, and so this is what it's out there. It's out there to help the internet be a safer place. We hope everybody can be, sign up to it. My email is there. You can contact me if you have any problems with it. And I think now it's time for some Q&A, and let's see what the questions that people have.
Thank you, Barry. Looks like we've got a couple of questions here. Yep. Let's start with the first. From the daily reports, what are the trends in Singapore and Asia that you are seeing so far for 2021? Though I understand you're updating the stats for 2020.
That would be Shadowserver. We haven't been doing like reports per country and things like that, and that's primarily because the teams get pulled into other investigations. It's one of those aspirant things that Shadowserver did about 6 years ago, but right now it's like I'll check in with the team who's actually full-time in Shadowserver. I'm just a volunteer mode. I check in with the team and they're going like, okay, sorry, I can't talk to you. We're working with this law enforcement crew. So I think with that, submit requests into the Shadowserver team hey, it would be nice to get these sort of reports. And of course, if you are an organization who is open to donate, Shadowserver as a nonprofit organization is funded all by donations.
Thanks, Barry. Next question. Does Shadowserver inform or instruct the security devices to block the target threat traffic?
Shadowserver doesn't provide from the network reports doesn't provide a blacklist service. Shadowserver does have a RPZ service, but the RPZ service is designed to help operators to actually help protect their customers. Now, I know of some colleagues in their networks, they take the Shadowserver daily report and they use it to actually, enforce, blacklist and blocklist inside their network, right? So they'll use it for different determinations. And they use it for action. So I'll give an example. Akamai, we take the daily report every day. We have two major scripts that takes the email reports, and then we have the API tool that goes into some other tools. And what we're looking for is all of our edge machines. So all the if you know anything about Akamai, we have our FleetFlow and SL machines. One's HTTPS, and the other one's regular services, and they're supposed to have a certain compliance profile. In other words, this is the ports that should be open. Here's the different services that's on it. Here's the exposure on the net, right? So we have them profiled. So we take the Shadowserver reports because they scan everything, right? We take them every day, and then we do comparisons. So we run a comparison with it, and if we in Akamai sees that something doesn't match, right? So this doesn't match up, that region gets pulled, right? So that's an operational trigger, right? We'll see like, oh, something's not compliant, Shadowserver doesn't match to our data. Okay, let's pull the region out, open a ticket, have a team go investigate what happened. Did something get misconfigured? Did a configuration get pushed out that didn't get pushed out properly? And when you're managing, tens of thousands of servers, it's a really, really valuable tool to have something like that. So we take Shadowserver with their scripting tool, we have our scripting tool, and we have a commercial scripting tool. That's kind of like, so then we have a public benefit tool, a tool that we wrote, and a tool that's a commercial tool put it together. So that's an example.
Thanks. We've got a few more questions coming up. Does Shadowserver periodically revalidate your trusted source?
Yes. So it will go through and every year kind of ping to make sure the emails are working, because you'll have emails to the organization, are you who you say you are? So that's kind of like an annual review to make sure that people as they churn and they move around, it doesn't happen. Like for instance, I forgot to let Shadowserver know when I went from one organization to another organization, and then and then they sent me a notification says you're no longer in that organization. We're removing you from this list, right? So that sort of thing does happen.
Therefore, this leads to the next question of how secure is the Shadowserver?
Shadowserver has the industry's top security professionals constantly poking at it. So it's some of the top security professionals on the planet who work there. And we also have access because the top security professionals that we work with and all the different major security vendors, they're all have a vested interest to make sure Shadowserver maintains its role, its stance, and protection out there. So we actually have others out there who scan and do pen tests, and we'll sit down at different conferences like DEF CON or Underground Economy Team Cymru or ISOI or security conferences like that, and we'll have a little side as people having beers and penetration hackathon, see what goes on, red team, blue team with Shadowserver.
Okay, the next question is a bit long, but what kind of data is shared in Shadowserver report? Do you use any AI ML to detect threats? And as well, interestingly, do you also monitor the dark web? So
the type of data that's shared, you can see with the list of the different reports. Let me go ahead and, so if you go to the site and share it, and actually I was going to share and just show the guy real quick so they can see it here. Share there, and go here and escape there. And you can see on the Shadowserver report here on the network reporting, if you scroll down here, you got these different reports. So if you go down and say, here's darknet event reports, because he's also asking about darknet. Darknet is network telescopes, right? And so this gives the type of data, gives the example of the data set, so you can actually see how you script it, and then you just get access to it, right? The other question he had on there was around the the dark net versus dark IP. Shadowserver is part of those, as part of the investigations. Things that pop up on the dark net that are actionable that you can put into regular reporting infrastructure. Because the key thing with the daily reports is to automate it. You kind of set up a script or a scheme, and you kind of sets up an automatic engine. So it's the idea is the human part is to set up the report mechanism, and then later on go back, we check the report mechanisms to make sure that it's still actionable. There are some reports that get retired over time, but then some reports like the configure report, configure never dies. How long has that been around?
Okay. Question from Iskandar. How do you verify an ISP for access to customer ASN reports?
So you start with it's multiple factors. One, you check the email. Does the email belong to a zone? You look up the who is information, right? That's sort of, it's all the different basics that say you are who you say you are. You'll have cross checks. In other words, just because somebody asked, are they actually authorized within the organization? So they're, you're required with your, like for instance, your route registry blocks, and we'll check with the peering connections. Another source of validation is going through, because Shadowserver has a relationship with lots of the national CSIRT organizations, is Shadowserver reach out to the national CSIRT organization and say, this person is over here on this network, can you check on them? And then they'll call and check and make sure that this person is, one, works for the organization, and two, authorized to actually get the reports and get the data. So it's multiple sources, and it's kind of like a variable.
Okay. And Vincent have an interesting question from an enterprise angle. Because enterprise uses prefixes from their ISPs, is there any way for them to subscribe and benefit from Shadowserver reports?
So yes, because you can put your domain name in there, right? And then what you can do is you can ask your upstream service provider to swip the IP addresses. So you take the IP addresses when they allocate to you, like for instance, if they say, okay, I'm going to break a /24 part and make it, into a /25, and I'll allocate a /25 to you, or something like that. They could, with AP NIC, since we're in the AP NIC region, they can swip it. They can say, okay, now this /25 I allocated to enterprise, this enterprise. And then that means there's a track record going down to your organization. Shadowserver says, oh, well, now I'll send you the /25 as an example, right? So do submit, do ask, and it may take a little bit of tweaking with your upstream provider to make sure you get the IP address ranges on that.
Okay, good that the enterprises can make use of it as well. Last but not least, is there a way for shadow servers to identify zero-day attacks?
So Shadowserver is a lot of times in the middle of zero-day attacks that have yet to be announced yet. So in other words, there's activities that as the good guys in the internet are actually battling stuff, they'll spot, and they know that, okay, one of the ways to get the word out quick before the disclosure period, where T0 happens and a 0 day is disclosed, is to get the data into Shadowserver, right? So like that member example I gave that happened to me on one of my old networks, that was actually the early disclosure days. And there wasn't a lot of tools around with that particular vector at the time. And so the Shadowserver daily report kind of saved my butt, in the organization, because that report triggered the whole remediation action inside my network. So, but we trust, for discovering like, oh, here's a brand new vulnerability, they get reported into Shadowserver. So Shadowserver is kind of like a tool. Others go out there and figure it out.
Okay, thank you, Barry. Looks like that's all we have for your session.
And then in the chat, I did put the link to the presentation. So everybody here, if you want to like share this with others, or you want to share it with your bosses and your colleagues, go ahead, have at it. It's a Google Slides. We keep it up to date. There you go.
Okay, thank you.